The mission today is to sharpen your swords and get you ready for battle. It's time to fine-tune your craft and make you the best in what you do. The mission is to equip you to help anyone purchase what they need. We'll share the best advice from the best in their industry. You'll be listening to a conversation you wish you had with the mentors you wish you had. Take what makes sense to you and makes you better in your career. You guys, Bruce Lee said it best.
Absorb what is useful and discard what is not.
Hey everybody, Micah Henderson. Welcome to this episode of The Commission Mission.
Yes, and I'm Eric Gerace, and I'm really excited about our guest today. He is my sponsor at EXP. He's built an incredible team of agents underneath him. He has, they do a massive amount of transactions each year, and I'm going to try and keep this introduction as short as possible just because I want to hear as much as I can coming from Kevin today. So Kevin Kaufman, thank you for being on the show, and really appreciate you being here with us, and I can't wait for you to share some of the gold nuggets you have with our listeners today.
Yeah, guys, thanks for the opportunity. I appreciate it. And I'm excited to have this conversation.
Yeah, and I'm not going to hold back on any questions that I think might benefit me personally, because I'm sure there's somebody else that's wondering the same question.
Micah has his hands on the table. He's taking notes right now.
Yeah. I normally have a pen and paper on me at all times. But I
Kevin, how big is the team now? The last time I checked in, I know it was over 3,000, but do you have an idea of the number of agents underneath you right now?
Oh, so okay. So let's do this. Let me start here. When I say team, I think of my real estate sales team, right? So think of it as like my brand, the buyers and sellers that we help. When I say group, I think of my EXP group, or what some people might call EXP team, if that makes sense. So I'm just doing that for so we have the same language.
Yes.
And so if you hear me going back between the two, that's what I'm doing. So within EXP, my group, so part of, and I'm sure we can get into this if it's not already part of the questions that's planned out, is, so I've got a business partner, Fred, and he and I we're literally building two different lines. They're obviously stacked on top of each other, but they're actually two different groups. So my group is just over 1,700 actually. So still a big number. I wish it was 3,000 already. Fred's is also, 1670 or so by now.
So I think what I was doing, I was combining the two of you is where I got that.
Yeah. So that's probably it. Fun fact, my group literally just out. So we joined EXP 3.5, I guess June will be 4 years. And, my group just literally overtook his group in group size, because he's actually my sponsor, in the last 75 to 90 days.
That's amazing.
It started to gain some traction.
And so just to kind of get some clarity too, how long did it take you to build that team of 7? I know you came from Keller Williams, I think, before, and you probably brought a lot of agents with you, but I know you've been growing like crazy since you've joined EXP.
Yeah, so in terms of like growing the group, if you will, the EXP group, that, man, I got to be honest, I know it hasn't been slow. It just feels slow. And I think that's probably true for most entrepreneurs and anything where they can they see that there's a path and there's something they're going after. So it really feels like it's a slog in the mud. There's some days where it's like, oh man, we really made some great progress last month or the last 6 months or whatever. And then like most days, I think like most entrepreneurs, it's like, damn it, why aren't we further along? So it's taken some time. Now we brought our real estate sales team, like I defined a few minutes ago, with us. And that truthfully wasn't that big. I mean, it was big compared to most real estate sales teams, probably like about 40 people or so that we brought with us and sort of had divided up between our two groups. And then since then have grown that into, like I said, just over 1,700. So for perspective, in growing that, like my front line at EXP, so the people who named me directly as their sponsor, it's actually only 38 people that are active right now. So meaning they're active at the company now. So meaning I've had a little bit of turnover, not much. And those 38 people have turned into over 1,700. Like I said, I think it was like 1,725 this morning when I looked.
Well, when you see a goal and you're focused on it and you want it, you may not think about the patience and the hard work it takes to get there, but there's a long road of trial and error sometimes of going through working out kinks until you finally get there. But not only the growth that we kind of been talking about recently, just in the last couple sentences, but the actual production. You have to keep your team going. You have to make sure that you're not just growing, but the team itself is.
You got to eat.
Yeah, you got to eat. You got to get the transactions are going, because that's half the point too. How much time would you say that you stay focused on growing, and how much time do you stay focused on making sure your established team are getting out and making things happen?
So when you talk about the division of labor today versus, and I'll go back and kind of break down what it was like June of 2018 when we moved over as well. So today, truthfully, if you've ever read the Millionaire Real Estate Agent book, you have this concept for a 7th level real estate team. I've got about as close to that as most people will get. And I don't say that kind of braggingly. I just mean, that's the way I've chosen to operate it, right? And typically when that happens, there's usually a family member involved or some sort of sale or something like that. But we've been able to kind of grow that organically. And part of that came with some sacrifice. So today, my involvement in the real estate sales team is probably about an hour a week, which I know doesn't sound like a lot. Now, my business partner probably does more like 4 hours, maybe 5 hours. And so that's a little bit different. But if we go backwards, let me answer that question. So I'm able to kind of concentrate more of my, what I would call working activities that will impact that, what I call the revenue share group or my EXP business, right? So I'm able to do that today, where the vast majority of my working activities impact that. Now, if I go backwards 3.5 years, it was probably a little closer to a 50-50 split for me. And then probably more like a 75-25 or even 80-20 split in favor of the team for Fred. And then we've been able to, as we've gone along and the revenue share has increased and we've continued to make really good systems in our sales team, we've been able to kind of alter our times. Now, part of that is because we started building a business long before we saw EXP that would hopefully not require so much of our time. Right. And so a lot of that is like, I don't want to call it dumb luck. It was, I guess maybe, in a lot of ways at the time, I felt like I was missing out on so much because I was so focused on that real estate sales team for so long. Like literally didn't invest in anything, saw opportunities, but just didn't have the time to dive in, or chose not to, I should say, and just kept reinvesting money and time back into the sales business. And now I benefit from that today because we'll still sell, a few hundred homes a year. And again, I'm outside of maybe an hour a week. Sometimes it's less than that. Occasionally it's 2 hours a week. It's still a good and viable business. And so most of my time can be dedicated towards the EXP revenue share opportunity, as well as some of the other things that we have our hands in.
Yeah, and I just want to comment on the dumb luck comment, because I don't think anything that you've done is dumb luck, because you set the intention. It might feel like it sometimes, but you set the intention, and what's really important is you started taking steps towards it. And as obstacles showed up, you figured out a way and you kept moving forward with it. And so, yeah, you kind of maybe lucked into a situation, but you created that luck by taking those steps, because a lot of people don't do that. They hit those obstacles or challenges in the way, and and it derails them completely. So, just taking 40 from 1,700. That just blew my mind right there for a second. I'm still
that's
chewing
power.
on that.
That's the power. That's why this model is why this model is so powerful, right? Is because, and it's also why it's different. So understand. So I will joke, if I go back and look at my career, we built our business on short sales, which is a skill set that was rare. That we had. So as an example, we closed probably 90 to 92% of all the short sale listings we ever took, which was easily over 1,000 over the first couple of years of my career. And the reason I would get short sales is because I knew more about short sales and how to actually get a short sale approved with a bank than pretty much all other realtors, where the industry average was like a 40% success rate. We were more than double, right? And then in 2012, the market starts shifting. I have a lot of stuff going on in my business. And trust me, I've failed and failed and failed again. And 2012 was just one of those times where I was really failing hard. I learned to what I call become a realtor, which was I had to get good at taking listings where the seller actually had equity. And I actually had to go to their house to get the listing as opposed to doing it over the phone or making them come to my office if they actually wanted to meet with me, right? So wildly different things. And then a couple years later, once we kind of got that balanced out, I had to learn how to recruit agents to my real estate team. And what I realized, that was a journey as well. And then what I realized since joining EXP, growing a big real estate team and recruiting for those purposes, there's a different way of doing that than there is for growing for my goals anyways at EXP and what I want my EXP income to look like. And it's it's literally a completely different skill set. They're correlated, but they are very different and the actions have to be done differently. So there's been all these times in my business where I've gone from, when I was still at KW, they had this model that's from the Millionaire Real Estate Agent book called E to P, entrepreneurial to purposeful. So there's been these different times in my business, and EXP is no exception, where I've had to go from what I was good at entrepreneurially or sort of very naturally into doing things purposeful, and that maybe were not the way I thought I should be doing them, or really required me doing something counterintuitive to the way I thought I should. If that makes sense.
Man, there's so much to unpack with everything you just said. I want to point out the gold nugget of knowing the product, just like you did with the short sales, and having that niche and being successful in that. And that success allowed you to grow organically into what you're doing now. And in the whole process of growing, that recruiting one way versus recruiting another way, how much was there a learning curve? How much did you learn from a mentor? How much did you have to figure out by yourself? And what were those failures and how did you overcome them?
So lots of mentors. That's my thing. You were talking earlier about like
that's
the ticking
my thing. I love mentors.
Asking the questions. That's literally why I run a podcast, is because I tend to get people who I corner them and I start asking them a ton of questions, right? And I'm taking notes. And so like I run a podcast because it's selfish, because I want to learn.
This is exactly why the commission mission was born. Was that we surround ourselves by the experts, so we don't have to be the expert. You don't have to spend 30 years to become a world-class chef to learn. We just need the recipe on how it's done. And what better way is to invite guests that have done exactly what we want to do on this. So
yeah, that's the thing, right? So I've always been after mentors. The first time I went to a class on recruiting was actually, I'd barely been in the business. I think I had my license for 2 years. It was August of 2009. And I remember showing up and written on the board from a guy that was the first time I met him. He became my mentor for a while. And still I would consider him someone I learned so much from. He wrote, "Recruiting is a process, not an event." And I realized in that moment that on my real estate sales team, I had been treating hiring as an event and not a process. And so that was kind of like my first, oh gosh,
epiphany.
But then there was a whole lot of trial and error. I remember that one of those changes in our business where Fred and I really had to reevaluate that we were doing things and really do things counterintuitive and quite frankly, just make some uncomfortable decisions and changes. I think it would have been the end of 2014, so definitely in the second half, third or fourth quarter. I realized it was the fourth quarter. Realized we were going to grow. Part of our strategy was actually going to be to go recruit more agents. And I knew that meant I was going to be the person to do it, just on the strength of what I bring to the table versus what my business partner brings to the table. We're very complementary. And it sort of meant that I had to be the guy to go out there and do that. And I learned a lot by trial and error. And I'm the type of guy where I started getting in motion and I started setting appointments, a lot like I learned how to get really good at taking listings. I could set an appointment, no problem. I knew how to ask. And then it was all about from just constant failure is what it felt like, learning to refine from there. And I remember the first time I've had a business coach for 11 years. However, that I think it would have been 2015 or 16 was the first time I hired an actual recruiting coach. So an additional coach to teach me and coach me specifically about recruiting real estate agents. And then of course I've had mentors and stuff along the way. So, I mean, that was the first time I really went, man, I need some more help outside of what I already have. And I'm learning a lot and I'm going to a lot of classes and I'm reading books on recruiting and I'm doing the motions and I'm getting a little bit better. But like I've always, same reason I talk to people who are really smart and do things is I don't want to get a little bit like I want to shorten the curve, right? I want to shorten my time frame as much as possible. So if I can learn from someone else that's been there, done what I want to do, then I'm gonna take what I can from them.
So while I got you cornered, when it comes to the whole recruiting process about, you have to find who you're looking for, get better at that, what your approach is, what should attract them to you and what differentiates you from them. And then how do you motivate them to take action in the direction you want them?
This is probably not the answer you're looking for. I'm not one of those people that believes I don't believe you can motivate somebody. I think you can aid in motivation. And I think the way that we do that is to become more consultant-like and to help basically help solve problems and help give opportunities to people. And so I think that's probably not a very, what I would call, or my friend Chris would call a crunchy answer. Mm-hmm. However, that truly is my viewpoint of it, whether we're talking about recruiting to a team or trying to be as effective as possible with the EXP opportunity, which again, those are different strategies and different ways of recruiting. Mm-hmm. In my mind, they're done very differently. One of them is a much shorter cycle, the team, and can be done in a lot shorter period of time, although it's still a process, not an event. And then the other, you've got there's just a different way of approaching it completely to make it grow. There's what works, and then there's what duplicates. And on a real estate team, you can do what works. But if you're trying to grow something like EXP revenue share, you don't have to. I've chosen to learn what duplicates because that gets me closer to what my goals are versus just what works.
So from what I found, prospecting for the end user, the client, is very similar to prospecting for an agent. You're finding what somebody wants and you try to fill it. And then, like you said, if you're acting more like a consultant rather than a salesperson, if you look at it more, and a consultant is much less transaction than a salesperson, right? A salesperson is, you want this, let me get payment information, sign there, have a good day. Whereas as a consultant relationship, it's more ongoing, right?
You're there to solve a problem too. You put yourself you position yourself as the expert. You position yourself as a problem solver, and like one of the things that I've found, so we do a lot of creative real estate transactions, and there's a lot of moving parts to a deal when you're doing lease purchases or seller subject to seller financing. And so what we found to kind of whittle out the tire kickers and people like that is to give them a very small step. Right. So do this little thing. And then once they respond, then you feed them another bite. Okay, now do this thing. And so as long as you just give them little bites at a time, and they're responding, then you continue and work with that relationship. The ones that don't take that first step, then we'll put them into some kind of follow-up sequence, but we realize they're not now. So
and I think just having the mindset of just not now versus no is so important, whether we're talking about recruiting for a team or for like revenue share, like we're talking about now, right? This whole thing is really a process. And for some people, that process is going to be shorter, meaning because they're open to it, they're looking for a change for one of a couple reasons. And so that's cool. You're going to be able to go through those steps. Something Fred and I call the 4 simple steps. You're going to be able to go through those steps much sooner and get to the point where they move, right? They make a decision. Versus someone who's not open and ready now, to me, that's okay. I think the reason why people get frustrated, both with like recruiting and even going back to the consumer is because we're imposing our timeline and our desire to make a sale or to get a recruit upon someone else,
Or like,
as opposed to just meeting them where they're at. And so when we get good with not having a predefined timeline, that's when the results can really open up.
you just made me think about what Nolly said. Follow up with them until they buy, die, or ask you to stop. And so that stuck out in my head. That's a direct quote, and that stuck out in my head. And but yeah, that's just following up with them. And so when it is the right time, on their timeline, on their terms, you're there just as ready and willing as when you first met them. And it would have been real convenient if they wanted to pull the trigger right at that time. But what are the odds? So that's why.
Yeah, well, they're very small, like statistically. I mean, if you think about why people move brokerages, it's mostly for one of two reasons. Number one is they're pissed off at their broker. Everybody gets pissed off at their broker or their brokerage for something. And so you're the person there in second in line, right? So, I mean, that's why people move. Or the other reason is they receive so much value from somewhere else that even though they're happy and it's like, this is good, they're like, I could get more and I could advance further if I went over there, which is why we got to get really good at having deep consulting conversations with people about where they're at in their lives, as opposed to trying to recruit somebody right now. And once you can see that and make that switch, the results are drastically different, not dissimilar to, you were talking about like the creative real estate space. What's the same? How many people do you know that have tried to do that and were super unsuccessful? Like most everybody. Because they didn't understand the process, and they were trying to do something right now versus going, hey, there's this, it's basically a system that as long as you can be patient enough to follow, you're gonna have results.
And that was the vibe when my partner and I found EXP. We found all the top producers and the top team builders in the company and interviewed them. And that was the exact vibe, and that attitude is why we said, "Hey, we want this guy to be one of our sponsors." He had authenticity. You can tell he was standing in his integrity, and he wasn't selling us. Actually, we said, "Hey, we interviewed Nolly, who was underneath Fred, and underneath Kevin, and he actually encouraged us to use Nolly as his sponsor." It was kind of like you when I met with Micah to sit down and do an insurance quote before I got into real estate, and I asked him a question. I said, "Hey, wait, is your company hiring?" And he closed down everything he was doing. He said, "Yeah, we are. You should go talk to the boss, and you'll get a much better deal if you go through it yourself." So Micah wasn't in my house with commission breath trying to like beg me to sell. And that was the same feeling that we got from you. You weren't trying to you didn't see me as a big stake. You know what I mean? It was like, you saw me as like a seedling, and how can I help you grow? And it was evident right away, and it permeates throughout everything you do. You have multiple next level agents, the group 4610, just a ton of support for the people that are on your team and in your groups as well.
Yeah.
So something I wanted to talk to you about as well, and you had mentioned systems. Right, and we were talking about the follow-up system. I'm sure you use a system that to keep in touch with all your agents and to make sure that they have what they need and they're progressing the way that they're supposed to progress. You're big into automation. I need to get better at that. So in this world that everything is moving towards, using technology. How do you think things are going to move forward in both of our industries, whether we are working with people in person or virtually, and how does that relate to whether you're talking to somebody who's an agent or the end consumer? Because what are we doing right now? Where are you located, Kevin?
I'm in Tempe, Arizona.
You're in Arizona. We're in Florida, and we're having a great conversation, the same as if you were in person. But I think I love working with people in person. Right? I know things lately in this world can make people feel differently about that. But when it comes to building relationships, building trust, building rapport with somebody, I think doing something in person. Just like you were saying, when it comes to the short sales and having meeting clients at the property and having them come to your office, I mean, did you do that for the purpose of rapport, or do you think that moving forward, there's still value in meeting people in person, or should we just, let that go and just go all Zoom all the time?
No, I don't think there's like this one or the other. The reason I didn't go to people's houses initially is because it wasn't efficient for me. It wasn't effective for me to drive around to somebody's house and to take their listing when I didn't need to go sell them on anything. In fact, I was in that position. I was so busy with them. I was trying to make sure that they qualified to be a good client for me, right? You can do a lot over the phone and over Zoom. And in person is great. You can move so much faster in person relationship wise than you can over a Zoom or whatever. That said, I think regardless of what's happened over say the last 24 months, the world was already going that way, right? Because technology has already been pushing us that way for years. And as long as we look at it as a tool and something that we use to strengthen or do better with our strengths, then we're going to be in good shape. And I mean, that's the thing I look at. I don't really look at it as a good or bad, or do I have to do things one way or the other. I just think what's available, what resources do I have to do what I do better or easier or both.
Yeah, and from my perspective, right, I transplanted from California to Florida. So for me to have tools like Zoom and FaceTime and things that we can do to stay in touch, it's incredibly better to stay in touch and get that some kind of visual connection with somebody using these tools now. So and if you're trying to grow with everybody's Zoom every day, but we can have a 10, 15-minute Zoom call, and there's that connection, there's that support. You can kind of get a read off how they're doing, if they're stressed out, what you need. And so it's I don't use it one or the other. When I'm here in person, it's the deals in Florida and you're around in Panama City Beach, I love going out and showing houses and doing that aspect too. But I love Zoom. I love text messages.
You said, hey, you have teams in Detroit and Seattle, and you can't go out there. Well, you can. It's inefficient, but I like what you just said, Kevin. Meeting somebody in person moves the relationship a lot forward. And if your relationship is already there, already developed, you could be more efficient and get a lot more done virtually. Whether you're trying to move a process, a transaction down the field, or trying to move a relationship down the field would kind of determine which avenue you want to go. I like that.
Yeah. And I think part of it too is it could just be hey, here's what I have time wise. There's a certain time allocation I have every day, every week, every month to, I'll call it work. What's going to be the most effective way for me to do what I got to do. Right. So sometimes it's going to be technology is going to help me move it along faster. Sometimes it's what? Nolly. You talk about Nolly specifically. Let's just go back. Here's a funny story for you, Eric, about Nolly. Nolly and I and my business partner, Fred, Fred and I met Nolly because we were on a panel together at a Keller Williams event in Orlando in 2009. And it was on short sales, of course. So we go way back and we just became such good friends. We became, I've had dinner at Nolly's house more times than I can count. He's a brother to me. His wife, Josie, is also, I love her to death. So we're close.
I think I introduced him on the show as, if you don't like this guy, something's wrong with you.
Absolutely. You're basically an asshole if you don't like Nolly, is the way I look at it. He really, because he's that guy. He's that nice all the time, every time. That's genuinely who he is. But so fast forward to summer of 2018, Fred and I move over to EXP. Nolly doesn't want to return a phone call. He knows we're at EXP. He's literally the one guy we recruited and went after hardcore, because we knew, we're man, if there was ever anything built for somebody, this was built for him. And he admitted later, the only reason that he even looked at the model was out of an obligation that he felt to us because of our relationship. So knowing at that time is already 9-10 years old, right? It was a 9-year long relationship at that point. Then here's the really funny part though. But he just he saw the model and he's this is amazing. This is great. Yeah, I really see it. But he wouldn't commit to it. And I finally, one day I look at Fred, I go, I'll bet you anything, if we just show up at the guy's doorstep, he's going to do it. And he's like, you know what? You're probably right. Let's go. So we literally booked a trip to Austin. Just said, hey man, what day I'm going to be in town. Can we come over for lunch or whatever? And he's like, yeah, cool. So we show up on his doorstep, knock on the door, and hang out. We don't even talk about EXP for like 4 hours in, almost to the point where we have to head back to the airport. And he looks at us. He's like, so are we doing this EXP thing or what? And we're like, yeah, let's go. I mean, that was it. That's all. And so sometimes, but that also takes for me, that was worth it.
And that is the perfect case study of what we're talking about.
That was a great example of working with building a relationship, the in-person dinners, and then finally deciding this is
being the consultant. You weren't there to sell him on EXP. You weren't there to convince him against his will. You weren't there to prove your point.
I was there to visit. I did what they do in Texas. We went to visit because that's what they do. Like, you know what I mean? Yep. And it was purely, and don't get me wrong, I wanted to quote unquote recruit Nolly. I knew how powerful it would be for me, and for him. And at the same time, like that was the thing, is like we're just gonna go be with him, right? And because we had such a long relationship, I'm willing to get up and fly, a couple hours and get home late that night for him.
And that's a great balance in between. Like, if you just look at this objectively, of course, that's a great power move to recruit an all-star, right? And what he's going to do because you know who he is and how he's going to conduct his business. But at the same time, subjectively, that this was about relationships. This is about building trust with somebody over a long period of time, and knowing what's the right thing, not only for the business but for the person as well, and doing what you have to do, whether it's over the phone or a visit, making sure that it happened.
Yep,
that was awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think part of having success in recruiting, whether we're talking about no matter what type of recruiting it is, understanding that there's, I guess for me anyways, like in sales, I was never the guy that would like call me like, hey, Eric, this is a business call. I'm who do you know that's looking to buy or sell real estate in the next 30 days? Like that wasn't me, right? I know some people that is them, and they're very effective at it, and that's okay. But I always knew that wasn't me. So I do think, just like any other sort of sales style, you've got to be really aware of who you are and so that way you know what strategy is best. Because the reality is, it's boring and it's not sexy. It doesn't happen overnight, whether we're talking about sales or recruiting or whatever. Nothing happens overnight. And so you've got to be willing to go, hey, if I use this style, I'm willing to do that day in and day out, knowing that it takes a while for the results to really show up. But as long as I stay consistent in it, I'm going to be good. And I became aware. I became aware that was my way. Two things: buy, sell, or die. Just like Nolly says, it's nicer. Buy, sell, or ask me not to call again. When it comes to following up, that's my approach in following up. But also my approach is like, I want to build a relationship, and this isn't going to be like it's okay. Like you could. I mean, I would have people tell me when I was knee deep in sales, like, hey, I'm not selling for 10 years. I'm like, I don't care. I'll still have my license in 10 years. We'll do the deal then. Are you okay if I stay in touch with you until that point? Because again, it's not my timeline that matters. That's important. It's theirs.
Yep. Oh, that's good. So, I'm going to use that. So in doing different episodes, I've started noticing gold nuggets as they're said, but then also noticing like highlights, like everything that you just said in the last 30 seconds is a standalone great bit of video that is going to help somebody. But also hearing something and saying like, I'm definitely going to use that. I'm definitely going to use, buy, die, or ask me not to call. I'm definitely going to use, hey, this is about your timeline. I'll call you back. I'll just set the time in my phone for 10 years from now, and I'll say, hey, where you at? And it's all going towards the funnel, the classic sales funnel. Yeah, I'll talk to you when it's on your terms. So this is great, and I like to read up on certain guests and prepare And I said, Eric, what should I do to prepare? He's like, man, Kevin, just we're just going to talk, and it's just going to happen, and it's going to be great. And he was right. Is there?
Well, I knew that he wanted to. I knew this would be a really awesome episode for him because he's been talking about recruiting. It's been front of his brain for the last few weeks, and so to have you on right now, he's
I mean, and we can keep going and going, but we try to keep our episodes under 5 hours. So, is there any? Is there any tricks of the trade, anything that really helped you, any source of inspiration, a book, an author, a motivational speaker, something that current people are not being taught or are lacking that preventing them from succeeding?
I mean, nothing's preventing anybody from succeeding except for their own mindset, right? So I'll give you a couple tangible things though. There's 2 books. So if you're listening, write these down, add them to the show notes if you guys can.
Yes, definitely.
There's a book by my friend Michael Burnoff. It's called Average Sucks. That's a great book that's helped me a ton. Michael specifically has helped me a ton in understanding the psychology part of it, right? So understanding that he was really the one that taught me about we got to get really good at having like deep consulting conversations about where people are at in their lives, and understanding like the even deeper psychological thing of we have to realize that when we're recruiting someone, in order for someone to go, yeah, I want to move, psychologically, like on a certain level, they have to admit that they were wrong about something to themselves. They're not actually wrong. Like they might have been right. Because like being at that other brokerage was probably a great idea until it wasn't anymore. Right. And so we've got to be able to understand like that's the thing that we're up against. We're not up against like, is our compensation model better? It's wildly better. But if that's all that it took, this company wouldn't be 75,000 agents today. It would be 750,000 agents, and it would have happened a long time ago. So we know that it's not about the things that most of us tend to focus on. It's really those psychological things. And then, of course, not staying in it for the long run. So like being able to marry those two things of deeply relational and understanding at a psychological level why people don't make decisions, why they don't move forward. And we've got to realize that like recruiting is really a deep psychological game. And most people, whether we're talking about the brokerage they're at or the company they're in or their relationship or fill in the blank, is based off a decision that they made a long time ago. It's not on current data and current facts. It's based on a story that they told themselves one day. They got fed up. Like, most entrepreneurs, like one day they were like, fuck it, never again.
Yep.
You guys been there. I know they have to. So here, this is kind of going back to one of the principles I said earlier about recruiting. In a lot of ways, it's so easy because all you got to be is number 2. Because one day they'll say, never again. I'm never going to let my broker treat me this way. So like, that's actually the most effective way to recruit if you have time. And I believe we all have, like, we got a lot of time here. So if we can let this be a 5-year thing instead of a 5-week thing, I'm going to win. I'm going to win big time. So because people go, never again will I have a boss. Never again will I fill in the blank. Never again will I be treated like X. Never again. And so they make the decision that's just right in front of them. So Michael really helped me understand that. So I can't recommend his book enough. It's called Average Sucks. You can go to probably averagesucks.com or you can find it on Amazon. And then the other book that really gets into high level, it's actually almost lower level, but it's easier way to do it, or lower level meaning it's a baby step into some really deep level psychology stuff, is a book called Exactly What to Say by a guy named Phil M. Jones. Had both of these guys on my podcast within the last year because they're both amazing at what they do. And Phil's book, Exactly What to Say, it's what it sounds like. It's exactly what to say in these scenarios. But Phil breaks it down into situations where what he calls low stakes situations. So you can practice saying these things, their scripts, if you will, in a low stakes scenario. Like the example he gave me when we were recording was like, listen, if you can't persuade your spouse to go to the Italian restaurant instead of the seafood restaurant, like maybe don't using this technique, maybe don't try it on the $1 million client. Right. So let's get good in low stakes situations using the power of language and the power of tapping into somebody's subconscious mind. Because when you do that, you can move people forward a little bit faster. I'll reiterate what I said earlier. Is like, you're not going to convince somebody to do something. I mean, I suppose you can, but that never works out in my experience. So, but what we can do is we can realize it's a long game, and then we can have these little things where we get really good at our craft, and it's truly about the other person, to where we can absolutely speed up the timelines.
You need to make the introduction to those two gentlemen, and so we can have them on our show as well.
Oh man, but so there's a point in every episode where I end up being like, man, that's deep. And so when you were like, well, just because it was the right decision then doesn't mean it's the right decision now. Circumstances can change, and then just being number two, being the next. That means number one is no longer the right choice anymore. Time to go to number two. So that's really good. And then I like how that book is laid out with different situations. That I guess that's how I think, different scripts that of course you're not going to memorize them verbatim, you're going to internalize them and make them your own. But that is how, in my mind, to apply what I've learned so that I can actually use it. Man, that's good stuff. That I'm glad you brought up those two books, Kevin.
They're solid. They're both have moved the needle for me in a big way, as well as for a lot of other people.
Right.
Awesome, Kevin. Well, thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate your time, brother. It's been
thanks a lot, guys. I appreciate it.
Great meeting you, man.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Hey everybody, thanks for watching this episode of the Commission Mission. I hope you got a lot out of it. We need you guys to like, follow, subscribe, whatever that action is for the platform that you're watching it on, and please leave a review. That's a great way of giving us a compliment.
And if you're listening to this show and you're interested in working with a great team in either the financial industry or real estate, Mike and I have opportunities available for people to join our team. You can find us at livingthatcommissionlife.com and go to the Join Us tab.
Highland Finance, helping you prepare for life. The profit your business brings in should go to you, not accidents, injuries, and hurricanes. Do a policy review on your general liability and workers' comp today. Our proven track record helps our clients prepare for life. Call 850-359-5989. Highland Finance.